Patch cards are wild, the HPs are massive, the strategies are cheesy, and the beast chips are pretty OP. There are exactly 118 different effects to choose from, many of which are quite powerful and strange when combined in different ways. In this video, we'll be breaking down 10 unique builds that you can use to dip your toes into the patch card format. If you're wondering why we're talking about patch cards, we've got a Hub.Patch Tournament coming up. There are absolutely no bans as long as it's legitimate. There is everything being legal, and it is available for Tenguman Switch. Definitely click on the links below to learn more info. Before we get into the 10 different builds, let's talk about what patch cards are in general. These are going to give Megaman all sorts of different effects. It's kind of like the Navi Customizer, except it's way more diverse. For example, one of the best patch card abilities you can get is called Chip Recovery. It means every single time you use a battle chip, you're going to heal for a set amount, usually 30 or 40. That might not sound like a lot, but multiply that by the 30 chips in your folder, and that's a lot of free healing just for using chips and playing the game. Heaven forbid you're at 1 HP with undershirt, it can be really hard to kill somebody. Another really important thing you can get through patch cards is the ability to change Megaman's charge attack. Now, he can only use these different charge attacks when he's not in a cross, which means that actually crosses are a bit weaker and less important in the patch card meta. But in any case, you can do all sorts of crazy things. For example, one of my favorite charge attacks is having Grab Banish as a chip. So for example, if your opponent is trying to go for all sorts of area grab spams, your Grab Banish as a buster is going to be able to regain those panels, and you yourself can take advantage of that through Color Point, Double Point, and all sorts of other attacks because you know you can always regain those panels back. Now, another strong thing you can do is related to your buster in general. Now, your speed and charge stats are the same as the Navi Customizer. They cap out at level 5, but your attack stat can actually go beyond the 5 given to you through the Navi Customizer. That means that your regular P-Shot can turn into 6, 7, 8, 9, or even 10 damage, kind of like using the Buster Up. Now, your Charge Shots and your Beast Buster cap out at 5, but because your regular P-Shots are pretty powerful, just spamming that can be really strong. Heaven forbid you've got your Buster Blank glitch, as we've talked about in this video right here. You can occasionally fish for 80, 90, or 100 damage depending on your Buster stat, and if you combine that with a patch card that can give your Charge Shot different effects like freezing, that means that just spamming your P-Shot is a very powerful and strong way to deal damage. Look at this clip right here. Now, if you think that having status effects on your buster is extremely degenerate, you'd be right, but thankfully, patch cards can also give us status guard. Normally, you can only get this ability by using Tomahawk Cross, so Gregor never even had access to it, but now anyone can shut down all sorts of annoying nonsense like paralysis from Kernel Force, or maybe bubbles or freezing or whatever. In fact, Planetman is one of the best mod cards in general because not only does he give you status guard, but he also increases your HP and he turns your regular P-Shot into a 60 damage crackout. Now, patch cards all have positive and negative effects, but the negative effects can be counteracted by a patch card that's loaded underneath it. That's right, the order in which you download them does matter. Take, for example, this Miney card. It's very strong because it does indeed give you attack 3 to go beyond your Navi Customizer's 5. However, it also disables air shoes, which means if you had air shoes in your Navi Cust, it wouldn't work. If you put Saddle underneath it, it does enable air shoes, which will counteract and end up giving you exactly the program that you want. This is really, really helpful stuff. In fact, because regular Megaman is so prevalent because you are able to use a different kind of charge shot, a really common thing will be having Megaman with different bodies, right? It's almost like style changes in Battle Network 2 and 3. You might have a heat element or a water element or whatever, depending on the order of the cards. The last one is going to be the body that you want. Now, because Totem is such a popular patch card, Fire Body is pretty prevalent, so it's pretty good to be able to not have a Fire Body if given the choice, but for the most part, whichever element you want to choose is ultimately up to you. It's really just a downside because you don't reduce damage, you're only going to take double damage from other attacks. So the first of the 10 builds we're going to talk about is Dark Megaman. The reason we're starting with him is because he costs all 80 megabytes that you have to spend for patch cards. So if you want to use Dark Megaman, he is the only option you've got. He is basically no frills whatsoever. He gives you attack +3 to go beyond your Navi Customizer's limit of 5, and he turns your regular P-Shots into a 50% chance of putting out poison panels. Now, the poison panels aren't really that much damage, all things considered. They can definitely add up over the course of the fight, but the real reason they're really helpful is because they can get rid of holy panels really easily, or maybe crack panels that the opponent is trying to set up. So as far as disruption goes, poison panels are super solid. The main reason you want to be using Dark Megaman by far, though, is his Dark Life Sword swing. Unlike Bugrise Sword, the Gregor Giga Chip, this actually does deal 400 damage. It doesn't cost you any bug frags either, and it's super hard to dodge. If you've got one area grab on the opponent, they're basically out of luck, and even without it, it can be really difficult for the opponent in any spot. At the end of the day, Dark Megaman is a really good option, especially for newer players who just want a lot of power without having to think about way too many combinations of patch cards. If you want to remind yourself how crazy patch cards are, how about using Number Open as a build? Yes, that's right, it's not just a meme, because you can get other abilities like Super Armor and Air Shoes that you normally really need just by using other patch cards. The best for this is going to be Diveman. He gives you a good chunk of extra HP as well as an extra Mega Chip, but the real kicker, in my opinion, is his charge shot being wide shot. This is extremely accurate. If you're right in the center, it's going to be very hard for the opponent to dodge unless they are behind an obstacle. Normally, Diveman's downside of -2 custom chips is pretty backbreaking, but Number Open will completely replace it. It's not even just custom +5, it's just its own thing entirely. And remember, if you want to get other patch cards on it, I would recommend using ones like Saddle, which is a cheap way to get Air Shoes, and Needler, which is a cheap way to get Super Armor, as well as a few extra buster stats. Both of these cards, by the way, are extremely top tier because they give you such a great set of abilities for a very low megabyte cost. At the end of the day, Diveman and Number Open is a super fun strategy. Another good option for starting patch card players is Big Bad Base BX. He's a whopping 70 megabytes, which means there's not a lot of room to pair him with other patch cards. In my opinion, the best one you can use with him is Twisty and Remobit. This changes your regular P shot into a 50% chance of cracking the panels they're on, which is so disruptive for a number of reasons. And because Base BX has the triple shot, which you might remember using in PvE, you're basically never going to miss, and your buster is extremely accurate. Plus, you got your shooting star for your charge attack, which is powerful, and your Air Shoes do turn back on, because even though Air Shoes would normally get disabled with the Twisty, putting Base BX after it means you do get it, plus your Super Armor. Altogether, a really strong disruptive build that does not require a lot of extra fine-tuning. Next up is Tenguman, who is simple but also deceptively very powerful. He gives you two very valuable Navi Customizer programs, Air Shoes and Beads. Normally both of these take up quite a bit of space, and having Air Shoes on your patch card is amazing for combining with other patch cards like Miney that have really strong effects but a downside of taking off the Air Shoes, right? So as long as Tenguman is below it, you'll still get your Air Shoes, which is very important. Now you're probably thinking, well, Wind Rack as your charge attack, isn't that just Tengu Cross? Well, yeah, Tengu Cross is really good having all those Wind Racks, right? You can blow away life auras at any moment, which is super valuable in Gregor, who is not normally able to access an effect like that. And imagine being able to row lock them with all of your area grabs and just spamming it repeatedly. And think about it, because the Wind Rack effect is pushing the opponent, it's really hard for them to stay in their front rows and actually deny you the ability to use your area grabs. So I would say Tenguman is great with a 5 area grab build, if you can even believe it, really trying to maintain as much zone control as possible. And then because Tenguman himself is so cheap in terms of the megabyte count, you can still pair him with all sorts of other effects. He's really simple, versatile, but also super effective. Time for something a lot more degenerate. How about Coldman, who for the low price of 34 megabytes will make it so that your charge shot has a 50% chance to freeze the opponent. Now it's worth noting that only Megaman's charge shot is going to be able to freeze the opponent. Going into a cross is not going to do it with their charge attack. However, if you have a Buster Bug, there is a chance that your fully powered attack will deal max damage, and it will also have a chance of freezing because it's effectively the same thing as a baseline Mega Man charge shot. So it's definitely worth noting you can still freeze the opponent into a different cross. And of course, freezing is super powerful. We all know that. They're stuck in place, which means you can keep firing your buster at them, or you can set up a powerful attack that the opponent is not going to be able to dodge. And heaven forbid you have any sort of obstacle breaking attacks, they will deal double damage to a frozen opponent. Similar to freezing is being able to bubble your opponent. The Starfish patch card is super strong. At only 15 megabytes compared to the 34 that Coldman gives you, your charge shot has a 50% chance to bubble. Now it is a little bit different, right? Obviously when you're in the bubble, they're going to take double damage from electric attacks, which is strong, or they're prone to maybe a full Gundel Soul EX or Gundel Soul 3. However, you can't spam your buster the same way you can with Coldman. if you are actually frozen, you can reapply frozen the more you spam it, so a really lucky turn with Coldman can be absolutely devastating. So once again, not the case with Starfish, but at a fraction of the cost, you get a very similar effect that is very easy to build around and is quite potent as well. Status conditions are super annoying, so let's talk about Status Guard once again. One of the best patch cards that can give you Status Guard is Planetman. He gives you 300 extra HP as well, and he also turns your P shot into a 60 damage crack panel shot. That means you can leap holes all over the opponent's side of the field while also dealing a decent amount of damage without any charge whatsoever. Now that does mean you can't fish for charge attacks with your Buster Blank, so why don't we just have an entirely new charge attack in general? One of my favorite ways to pair Planetman is by using Bug Death Thunder. Just imagine being able to limit your opponent's mobility with all of those cracks and holes on the opponent's side of the field while they struggle to dodge a 200 damage homing paralyzing attack. Wow. And while you're waiting to draw your Bug Death Thunder, you can use Slime's charge attack as a panel grab. If slow gauge is up, you would be surprised how much area you can absolutely steal off your opponent for very little investment. It is extremely powerful. In fact, I would say that area grab would actually be weaker than panel grab in this case because it's so hard to deny the opponent from going all the way into the opponent's space. But even without that, Bug Death Thunder is so strong when the holes and mobility is limited, and the fact that Planetman gives you Status Guard is just a cherry on top. Now, abusing status conditions is pretty obvious and kind of boring, but how about using your Buster with a different kind of effect, one that we see in a lot of battles but don't really take a minute to think about? This is pushing and pulling using your Buster. You might not realize this, but when you get hit by a wind rack or a lance that pushes or pulls you, you're basically unable to do anything for a brief few seconds. That means if you can spam your Buster to be constantly pushing and pulling, you are going to be interrupting your opponent from doing things and hitting them for a ton of damage, especially if you're at Buster 10. So the two patch cards here are Bomb Boy, which turns your regular P shot into a 1 out of 8% chance to push them back. It also fixes a few bugs, which is kind of nice. And you got your Mag Tech, which has your charge shot a 50% chance of actually pulling them in. And if you'll notice, as long as we put the Bomb Boy in front, even though it has the effect Charge Shot Addition disabled, the Mag Tech on the bottom will override that with its Charge Shot Addition with the magnet. It is a lot of fun, it's super strong, and it's also very disruptive. And the best part is, a status guard like Planetman cannot stop this nonsense. Our last build for today is Searchman, who gives you a really fun ability, Chip Shuffle. Normally, Chip Shuffle takes way too much space on the Navi customizer, but hey, a patch card can give it to you without any issues whatsoever. Sign me up. And you also get a little bit of extra HP at 5%, and your charge shot becomes Circle Gun. It does take a long time to charge up, but because it's a cursor attack and a time freeze one at that, you are going to be able to pierce through anti-damage super casually. The only downside of Searchman is a lock on air shoes, and as we've already talked about plenty of times, it's super easy to rectify that by throwing a patch card like Saddler right behind it. At the end of the day, Searchman is super cool. I think Gregor can really appreciate that because Falzer always has had access to dust shooting for more chip action. Gregor doesn't really get to chip shuffle all that often, so if you're looking to assemble maybe a really powerful Chrono Force combo, this is definitely a fun way to start. So there you have it, 10 different builds for patch cards, and that's just scratching the surface. That's not even necessarily the most powerful of all the options you can use. If you think 118 different patch card effects is overwhelming, don't worry, I've cut them down in half to the 60 patch cards that I think are most viable. I've linked that in the comments, and while you're there, let us know what you think. As always, a big shout out to the N1 Grand Prix. Thank you so much for your guides and resources, especially in making this video, and a particular shout out to Honor Knight. Thank you so much for your additional help and wisdom as well. As always, we'll catch you later, Scouts.